Hey everybody, it's Andrew again, your average jeweler, and we are back. 2020, obviously a crazy year, but I do have some questions I still want to answer for you guys, so let's get right into it. As always, thank you so much if you're here watching these videos. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so below. And if you hit the like button, that helps tremendously. Let's get into the question for today. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone come into a jewelry store with the concern of their ring is bothering them. It's usually not a necklace, sometimes it's a bracelet, but the question of allergies comes up. My skin is irritated, I must have an allergy to something. What does that look like? Are there some things I can do to prevent them? Are there metals that are better than others for that situation? Yes, and that is what we're talking about. So number one, I'm going to try and make this as easy as possible. If you have a ring or any piece of jewelry that is bothering you, the first thing that you should really do is thoroughly clean it. And I want to emphasize thoroughly, because there are many instances where you may even take a toothbrush, you really think you're getting into it, but the reality is it only takes a small amount of some kind of irritant in there to cause the problem you're experiencing, because you're likely wearing this piece of jewelry all the time, or at least often, and if you just have a small amount of irritant, something that has gotten under there or in there, a small little crevice of some sort, if there's stones of any kind, it might be sitting underneath the stones, and then maybe anytime there's a liquid that touches it, it runs down and irritates your skin. You may not have an allergy at all. You might just have something irritating your skin. So trying to make this as simple as possible, that should be your very first step, because it's the easiest and most simple. Now, if there are things that are in there that are hard to reach or you can't get out, if you know that your piece is safe to be put into an ultrasonic cleaner and you have one, that's a great option. That usually cleans almost anything out from there. But you may not be confident in that because some things can be ruined by an ultrasonic machine. So if you don't know, you should ask your jeweler. And then the second thing to that is you may not have an ultrasonic machine. Not everyone does. And certainly the ones that jewelers use are going to be a much better category of cleaner. And they're going to have other means and other ways to clean it. So you may want to have it professionally cleaned by a jeweler. This is something, depending on the situation, they may be able to do complimentary. A lot of jewelers do. But understand that depending on the situation, they may be within their own right to say this needs a much deeper cleaning, or you may want it high polished and really cleaned up. And usually those services you would have some kind of a charge for, but check with your jeweler, see if cleaning does the trick, because you'd be surprised how many times it does. The second thing we're talking about are actually allergies and having some kind of an allergic reaction or a sensitivity to different metals. I want to make sure everybody out there understands I am not an expert on allergies. I am not someone with credentials or a medical degree to handle that. I'm not a dermatologist. So if you really are experiencing something that you need definitive answers, you might have to have some tests done. You should probably check with your doctor or some kind of dermatologist. But I can give you some generalizations that I've observed over the years and that you might find helpful. One of those observations is what specific metal is bothering you, because we mostly deal with alloys in the jewelry industry, meaning when you wear gold, you're not typically wearing pure gold. When you wear silver, it's the same. With most metals, you're not dealing with the pure metal. So if you have a sensitivity when you're wearing sterling silver, for instance, you probably don't or don't necessarily have an allergy to silver. You may have an allergy to any number of the metals in there. Sometimes you'll find copper in those, nickel can be another one, and even going from different colors of gold, there are going to be different metals in there. So someone that may have a reaction to white gold won't necessarily have a reaction to yellow gold. In terms of likelihood of these allergies, I find that costume jewelry is the most likely thing to irritate skin, because as soon as whatever the outside layer, which is usually a plating, has worn off, you're going to find that whatever that base metal, or sometimes they call it pot metal underneath, is usually going to be much more irritating to the skin. Whether that again is the copper or some other random metal that they might use. These metals are typically made to be plateable, and they're made to be inexpensive. So they can vary greatly. There are some similarities, but ultimately these tend to be metals that are going to be most irritating to the average person. The next step up from that is going to be your silver varieties. Something I want to make really clear when it comes to silver is most sterling silver, whether it be necklaces, bracelets, rings, most of today's silver is actually rhodium plated. Now they do that for a few reasons. Sometimes they feel that it just makes the jewelry look more presentable when they're selling it. It tends to give a very polished, shiny finish that's easier to get than just raw sterling silver. The other thing is it mitigates tarnishing while it's on there, so you will have a rhodium plated piece. If it has a good solid rhodium plating on there, it usually doesn't tarnish very quickly or easily, so it is somewhat tarnish resistant in that regard. But ultimately in this conversation, that rhodium plating could serve as a hypoallergenic barrier. The problem with this is that it's a plating, and as soon as it starts to wear off, you might notice something is wrong. Again, because this happens over time, it could be the ring just needs to be cleaned. But I have seen many instances where people have this plating degrade or wear off over time, and now all of a sudden they find that the ring is irritating them. So it may be that the plating has worn off, and it usually is not cost effective to have a piece of sterling silver re-rhodium plated. As they're doing it in the manufacturing process on large scales, it's a very inexpensive process, but when you have to send it back up the chain and specifically rhodium one piece, it has to be refinished, it has to be cleaned, and then you have all the extra labor and shipping involved. So it's not as cost effective for most silver jewelry, but that is an option. Realistically, if it starts to bother you after that, you may have to move on, or you might just have to grin and bear it if the reactions are not so serious and you like the piece. Those are some things that you'll run into. As we get into the next level, we're getting into what would be gold jewelry, your gold alloys. Most people are not actually allergic to gold. I have seen some instances where people claim that the gold itself is the problem, but most of the time it's the other metals in the alloy. So when you have higher karat gold, your 18 karat or higher, 20 karat, 22 karat, those alloys having more pure gold to them are generally going to be less bothersome. So if you're looking into gold jewelry and you likely don't have a reaction to gold itself, higher purity gold is going to be a safer bet for you. The other thing in this conversation is most people are more bothered by white gold than they are yellow gold, or similarly rose gold than yellow gold. Yellow gold usually does not have as high a percentage of copper. It usually does not have any nickel in it. And those are some metals that will commonly cause irritation. So yellow gold, as a general rule, for most people is a safer alloy, whereas white gold and even rose gold can be more bothersome at times. But because this is situational and person by person, without you actually trying it on and experiencing it, it's really hard to say. Now the last level of this, if you're getting into precious metals, which is really what we're talking about today, you can get surgical grade steel, and most people are pretty safe with that, but it's not as easy to work with in jewelry. So talking about precious metals, the most hypoallergenic option for most people is going to be platinum, or at the very least some kind of platinum family metal. Now platinum is generally the most practical across the board because not all jewelers will work with some of the other platinum metals. I mentioned rhodium, but that's typically reserved for plating. You have palladium, but that's oftentimes much more soft, and so it can be impractical in that way. So when it comes to the platinum family metals, platinum itself is going to be your best option for most things. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos or you've done any shopping at all, you've probably seen platinum jewelry is more expensive. And that's a lot of different reasons, but the biggest one is that platinum is harder to work with. It just takes more time for a jeweler to make a nice piece of platinum jewelry. The other reason is platinum jewelry is usually a much higher percentage of the pure metal, where 18 karat gold, which is a high grade gold, is only 75% pure gold. Platinum is typically 95% or higher, or at least I should say a solid 90% or higher of pure platinum. But with many alloys being in that 95 percentile, you'll often see 950 marked on a lot of platinum pieces. So keep that in mind. If you really want to make sure it's not something that you're going to react to, platinum is a very safe option, but there is the understanding and the trade-off that it is more expensive. It's just going to be that way. But I would recommend trying the different color gold. But before you go through any of those steps, please make sure you give it a good thorough cleaning just to rule that out as a possibility. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed again, please do so. We've done so well in these past few months with people really trying to get more of this information, and I appreciate that. I hope you're enjoying this content. I'm sorry that there's been longer pauses during this 2020 time period, but with that said, thank you so much. If you enjoyed it or found any value, hit the like button and keep coming back so we can keep learning together.